The night Baba Adérèmí died, the talking drum spoke his name, and every dog in Ìbàdàn fell silent. Not a whimper, not a whine. 7,000 dogs in that great city, and not one dared make a sound as the Ìlú Dundun rolled his praises through the dark streets. Adérèmí, son of Adérèmí, weaver of cloth, keeper of debts, man who owed the forest a life. His wife, Ajoke, heard the drum from the doorway of their compound. She stood barefoot on the red earth, her wrapper loose at her shoulder, and she knew, she had always known, that the forest would one day come to collect. She looked at her 3 children sleeping in the room behind her. Tunde, the eldest, 14 and already stubborn as Iroko wood. Kemi, the middle child, 12, who spoke to lizards and claimed they spoke back. And the little one, Deji, barely 6 years old, who still smelled of the morning. She looked at her children, and then she looked at the darkness beyond the compound wall, and she whispered, "Igbatipte, the time has come." If this already has your heart beating faster, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. Every week a new story rises from the roots of Africa. Don't let a single tale pass you by. They said Baba Adérèmí had made his bargain 30 years before he died, in the year the rains refused to come. He had been a young man then, reckless, proud, and hungrier than any pride should allow. His father's loom was empty, his mother ground chalk to paste just to have something to put on the children's tongues. The yam barns had cracked open like broken promises, and the entire compound smelled of dust and desperation. So young Adérèmí walked into the Igbó Àgàn, the forest of bargains, and he made his offering, a black hen, a kola nut split 7 ways, his own blood pressed into the bark of the sacred Iroko tree. And the forest gave him what he asked for, 20 years of abundance, full looms, fat harvests, children born healthy into the world, a name that men spoke with respect in the market. The price. The forest had been simple about it, direct even, the way debts always are when they are new. "When your time comes," the voice from the deep roots had said, "the 3rd child of your blood must bring us what you could not carry with you." He had agreed, because he was young and the hunger was louder than the fear. He had agreed, and then he had 10 extra years of life on top of the 20, 10 years of slow guilt and quiet dread, watching little Deji learn to walk, watching little Deji clap at butterflies, watching little Deji become too alive, too laughing, too entirely himself to belong to any forest. Ajoke did not weep at her husband's funeral, not because she did not love him. She loved him with the particular ferocity of a woman who had chosen her husband against her family's advice and been proven correct for 30 years. She did not weep because weeping was a luxury and she had work to do. On the 3rd day after the burial, when the mourners had eaten the last of the funeral stew and gone back to their own compounds and their own problems, Ajoke sat her children down under the ackee apple tree in the center of the yard. She told them everything. Tunde's jaw went hard. Kemi's eyes went wide. Deji, small Deji, who barely reached his mother's waist, looked up at her with those round, undisturbed eyes and said, "So the forest wants something from me?" "Yes," Ajoke said. "What does it want?" "We don't know yet." Deji considered this with the seriousness of a child who has never been lied to. Then he nodded slowly. "Then we should go and ask." Tunde slammed his hand against the tree. "No, nobody is going to any forest. Baba made a foolish bargain before we were born. That is not Deji's debt to pay." Ajoke looked at her eldest with eyes like still water. deep and unreadable, and dangerous if you stepped in without knowing where the ground was. "Tunde," she said quietly, "sit down. I am not finished."
They went at dawn. Ajoke, Tunde, Kemi, and Deji, each carrying something. Ajoke carried kola. He carried the small cloth bag his father had left him, the one that had been sealed with a knot Deji had never tried to open. The Igbó Àgàn was 2 hours east of the compound, past the market, past the cassava farms, past the stream where the women washed cloth on Tuesdays. It began with a sound. The forest had a sound before it had a sight, a deep wooden breathing like something enormous slowly dreaming. At the tree line, Ajoke stopped. She split the kola and spoke the old words. The forest answered, not with a voice exactly, but with a shift in the air, a leaning in, the way an elder leans forward when someone is finally saying something worth hearing. Deji stepped forward without being asked. He opened the cloth bag. Inside was not gold, not a sacrifice, not anything Tunde had expected to have to fight off. Inside was a single piece of hand-woven cloth, the first cloth their father had ever made, before the bargain, before the abundance, when the loom was empty and the hands were only learning. Rough-edged, uneven, the kind of cloth only a beginner makes, full of mistakes and trying. Deji held it out toward the trees. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the forest exhaled, that slow, enormous breath, and something changed in the quality of the light. The birds started again. A monkey somewhere called once and went quiet. The smell shifted from damp and ancient to something almost sweet. Kemi, who spoke to lizards and claimed they spoke back, tilted her head and listened. Then she looked at her mother and said, "It says the debt is paid. It says Baba already gave the price. That cloth," she pointed, "that cloth is what he made before he was afraid. When a man gives you the thing he made before fear entered him, he has given you everything." Ajoke stared at her daughter. "You're 12 years old," Tunde said flatly. "How do you know what the forest said?" Kemi shrugged. "I listened." And that, the elders of Ìbàdàn would say later, was the end of the debt. They walked home through the morning heat, the four of them, Deji still holding the cloth and swinging it a little as he walked, the way children swing things, like everything is a little bit fun, even the things that aren't. Ajoke put the cloth on the wall of the weaving room, where it stayed for the rest of her life and the lives of her grandchildren, a little rough, a little uneven, proof of a man who had started before he knew what he was doing. Tunde became a farmer. He was still stubborn as Iroku wood, but Iroku wood builds good houses, so nobody complained. Kemi became a healer because listening, really listening, to lizards and forests and the things people cannot say out loud is most of what healing is. And Deji? Deji became a weaver like his father, but he made one rule for himself that his father had not. He would never make a bargain he could personally repay. He kept that rule until the day he died, and when the talking drums spoke his name, the dogs of Ìbàdàn barked and howled and carried on like dogs do, making noise for the joy of it, for the living of it, because there was nothing in the dark waiting to be paid. The forest remembered, do you? If this story moved you, like and share it with someone who needs to hear a tale from the roots tonight. Subscribe for new Yoruba folk tales every week, stories of wisdom, family, courage, and the world our ancestors left us. Comment below, what would you have carried into the forest? We read every response. Your story matters here.